Welcome, Dr. Julia Galvez Delgado, Professor, Vice Chair of Pediatric Anesthesiology at the University of Nebraska Medical Center and Division Chief of Pediatric Anesthesiology at the Children's Hospital and Medical Center of Omaha, Nebraska. I am so glad to have you here today. For those of us who may not know you very well, can you please give us a brief summary about yourself?
Yeah, thanks. It's really great to be here. I'm a pediatric anesthesiologist. I'm a parent of three awesome children. If I'm very quirky, I'm a computer nerd and love everything that has to do with computer information technology, medicine, life in general. And when I'm not doing those things, I do like to do a lot of fitness. I've transitioned from marathon running to yoga, meditation, and sometimes unicycling. That's where I'm at.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing, and thank you for joining us today. You are very open about being part of the LGBTQIA community. How has this affected your career in any way?
I think, that's a really big question, and I have to say that I this is an evolving process for me. This is relatively new, at least to the outside world, even though it hasn't been something that's new to me. But I can honestly say that it has been a positive experience for me. The biggest thing is it's hard to say because since I haven't been a part of the community openly for a long time, I'm not sure that it has externally affected my career, but I can tell you internally it has, because for the longest time I've always been afraid of what might happen if if my gender identity was known. I can remember going back to medical school and not being sure if I would match in residency. And then at some point, I decided that I wanted to take care of kids. And would I be able to take care of kids? Would people trust me to take care of kids? Would they trust me to be in practice or things like that? And there are no shortage of stories of people who lost their jobs, not even for being transgender, but for being gay and things like that. So those were a lot of the examples that I had to draw from, at least in those early years. And, but I have to say, at least the world seems to be changing because there are quite a lot more people who are openly transgender that have been role models for me. I didn't know them personally, but there are people that they're, noticeable enough to the world to know that, like, yes, a transgender person can be a physician and can be a leader. So namely, Admiral Rachel Levin, or current Secretary of Health and Human Services, is just one such example. But there are people in elected offices across the country, or professors at universities, and things like that really kind of started to maybe show me that perhaps there was a path forward. Having navigated it relatively recently, I have to say that impact that it's had on my career has been the opposite of what I have been afraid of. But it is an evolving story. So, yeah.
Thank you for sharing, and I'm glad that you have experienced such positivity in this journey of yours. So,
thank you.
And what advice do you give to others who may be experiencing a negative in the field of anesthesia?
You're not alone. I guess that's the thing that I would share. I definitely felt very alone in this space for a long time, even though I actually was surrounded by people who have been incredible supporters and allies. But even I couldn't feel comfortable talking to them, even because it's just something that it was just my own process. it's just, again, this is just my story, but just know that there are plenty of people out there who are like you, and it may not feel that like that's true, but it is.
Mm-hmm. Thanks. And thanks for sharing again your story. So, reports from the ASA and the recent publication from SPA indicate that the field of anesthesia is not very diverse, and even less so in leadership positions. How do you think we can successfully diversify our specialty and its leadership?
A great question. There are opportunities for everyone in anesthesia. I'm an example of that. I mean, but I'm not the only one. And I think, right now, especially within pediatric anesthesia, we're really seeing this with less people going into the specialty, from residency, and we're starting to see those trends nationally, not, in other specialties as well in anesthesia. And that's really kind of highlights the importance of, I would say, I've gotten involved with developing mechanisms for pipeline programs, just exposing people that just may not even be aware of having a possibility of a career in medicine, as early as we can do that, high school, even middle school, just like how can we do that? I think it is going to take a kind of grassroots community effort. By community, I mean like people in healthcare. And I think the other piece is in terms of setting up formal like mentorship programs, and people maybe seeing that those leadership opportunities are open for people independent of what you look like, where you came from, or any of those things, getting engaged in any programs that can support that. One that I particularly benefited from is out of Brandeis University. It's called the Sea Change Institute. It's they this particular one is for mid-career faculty, and their goal is to change the culture of leadership in academic medicine. And I've met some of the best peer mentors that I've had there, and they're not even in anesthesiology. And again, that's one of those places where, you can really draw from a strong community. And this isn't going to be an overnight solution, but I think, the next 5 or 10 years, there's going to be a lot of turnover in our field, just as people like, I mean, I'm 10 years into practice, right? So like 10 years ago, I was, that's when I was saying I would not be a leader, right? So like the people who are here now, like in the next 10 years, they're gonna have opportunities to lead, and hopefully we can keep making those open for people.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think like in a broader sense, as you said, we have to do more grassroots and like really connect with students, whether it's, from middle school or even elementary school and forward, to like just open their eyes that their healthcare field is open and there's a lot of opportunity. But I also think that we have to work on is creating a sense of community within anesthesia and in medicine, and also these like stronger mentorship programs for people of marginalized or othered backgrounds. It's tough, very tough to get through, all the steps, all the seasons of training, and even when you're attending level and and all that stuff. So
Yeah, but there is, I have to say, to some extent, there's at least, in the universe that I live in, which obviously there's a lot of um, different areas within our own specialty that I've never been a part of, right? Like in other subspecialties and societies and whatnot. Um, but interacting with like more senior mentors, senior faculty, et cetera, who are looking for mentees, like there seems to be like, a group of people who are dying for mentors and can't find them. And then there's a group of mentors who are like, I'm here. And the mentees. So like there's a disconnect kind of between those two groups, and it does take intentional programming, for many people, like how, like I didn't naturally like, come towards this leadership role. Like, how do we nudge people who are just unaware that they have that potential? And so to that end, I mean, I'm really encouraged that by a lot of work that's currently being done at the level of the ASA, within the Society for Pediatric Anesthesia, and then also, taking this is also I'm sharing this in the interest of just opening up more mentorship opportunities for people. But the Society for Technology and Anesthesia, like one of the activities that I engaged in is we have like a formal paired mentorship program for and individuals. I mean, this doesn't even have to be anesthesiologists, because with that society really is open to engineers as well, and device developers and everything. So it's sort of like looking at the community of perioperative innovation with a broad lens. But again, if you're looking for a mentor today, I guarantee you that within one of your societies, that's a really great place to start if you're looking for something where your needs are not being met within your own institution or practice or wherever you are. Or maybe they are being met, but you're just looking for some external mentor, because there's great value in having somebody that's outside of your bubble,
Yes, that's a great point. And thanks for highlighting the societies, and the society and the ASA, that they have some mentorship program that you can actively seek out.
Yeah. And even universities, like one of my other roles is that I'm now serving again, this started, I can't even take credit, right? Because the wheels for this started before I got here. But at the University of Nebraska, the dean is really investing heavily in mentorship. And I'm in one of the task forces to identify and develop mentorship pipeline programs for people in LGBTQ community within the university. And so I think organizations are really focusing on ways to create these systems where people can access the mentorship that might be useful to them. So the time that these opportunities weren't there when I was trying to do this 10 years ago. And if you talk to anyone, people who are like 20 or 30 years into their practice, they'll tell you that they had like zero. Like they'll like say what I had was amazing because they had even less than that. So I do think the needle is moving. But yeah, like, if you see anyone with a title professor next to them, don't be intimidated to talk to them.
Yes, that's another big point. Don't be shy.
Yeah.
You'll be surprised by how willing and open people are. So, just send them an email. That's what I do.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. If anything, nowadays, the culture might be more sensitive to not invading. Like, that's one of my struggles. Like, I don't want to invade other people's time.
Right.
So that translates into I can only ask for help for so many times, and at some point, like it, if it came from the other side, like that would be, something that I speaking just for myself, but really this is something that any mentor is always looking for someone to work with.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. We know that mentorship and sponsorship are very important for one's career advancement. Can you tell me how mentorship or sponsorship has helped you?
Yeah. For me, I only recently became aware of even the distinction between the two. And uh, I'd always been advised and kind of guided towards by mentors, and I identified those people as mentors. But looking back, I think many, at least some of them, really did function as both, or potentially even sponsors.
Mm-hmm.
And as I understand the difference between the two, a mentor might provide sort of like overall career guidance, maybe like how to set up a lab or how to establish a particular practice or something along those lines. But there's like they have had some experience, perhaps in the area that you are trying to develop, and so they're giving the advice, and it tends to be um, um, some people have described it as a one way relationship, right? The mentor is giving and the mentee is receiving. And mentors do receive some back. Usually there's a lot of like satisfaction and in having those relationships,
Mm-hmm.
but if anything, the benefit can be a little bit imbalanced with the idea that the mentee actually gets more benefit than the mentor. I think some folks might look at it that way. Whereas a sponsor, it's actually not as used as much in medicine, I think, but in many other industries, in business and legal worlds and things like that, it's more formalized. It's this idea that you have the sponsor would actually um, have a means of opening up an opportunity for the person that's being sponsored, and there's some investment, some cost to that sponsor, right? Because like I might recommend an individual for something, and if that individual doesn't actually perform, then my reputation somehow is affected by that. So there's a little bit, at stake there. But then if that individual that's being sponsored is successful, then the sponsor also benefits, right? Because like, look, I can put together awesome teams. So there's a little bit more of a symbiotic relationship, and the
Mm-hmm.
mechanisms are different. And I don't know that I was aware of that
Mm-hmm.
aspect as much when I was going through that. I but I would encourage people to identify to look for opportunities to set up both of those types of relationships and to being intentional about it. Um, as far as when I was in my early career, I really benefited from having, I would say, formal mentors and also peer mentors. And I think actually the peer mentors probably for me have been more important or played a bigger role, I think, than some of my formal mentors. And a peer mentor is someone that is literally walking the same path, someone at the same stage that you can actually really see eye to eye with, have frank conversations, you're both solving the same problems. And I think the real value that I have drawn from those peer mentorship relationships is, our jobs can be quite isolating and lonely, especially we tend to work in different operating rooms. So like I probably will never see how you practice anesthesia if we're in the
Mm-hmm.
same practice, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And vice versa.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so there's this idea that like, I have it really hard and other people don't have it as hard. But having that like a broad network of peer mentors, even if and they don't even have to, for me, like that network has actually grown outside of anesthesia, has really opened my eyes to realize that we're not alone, right? Like the challenges that we're dealing with, how do we raise families, how do we even figure out how to set up to raise up any of the things, you name it, whatever it is that you're trying to do, you are not the only person trying to do that. So the more you can connect with the community to get that sense of belonging and common problem solving strategies and really relying on each other um, is super important.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thank you for that. Yes, mentorship is important, and there's a lot of value in your peer mentorship, as you mentioned. So yeah, leaning in on your colleagues is helpful.
Mm-hmm.
What is the best advice you've received from one of your mentors?
Um, I mean, for me, like it's been just pushing my limits, and at the same time learning how to say no. I think those have been two difficult things, like I tend to probably agree to too many things, and so being um thoughtful on how to find a direction, for me, like I tend to find a lot of things interesting all the time, and so I do need a little bit of that guidance. Those of you who know me are probably laughing right now.
Mm-hmm. Or joining you.
Yeah, perhaps. So,
Some of us have that same problem.
mhm.
Oh, networking is also a key element to advancing one's career. How have you created a network, and how has it impacted your career?
um, yeah, I mean, this really builds on what we were just talking about, especially like having a network of peers, like um, I, um, life has been really full of challenges over the years, both personally and professionally. And having, a broad network of peers to draw from really has helped me to develop resilience, to be able to keep going with what we do every day.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I just can't emphasize enough just that the importance of having that, um, your own group of people, whether they're in academics or outside of academics or whatever that looks like. But
Mm-hmm.
people that you have some common ground with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's important to find your people. So,
Yeah,
um, so burnout has become a major topic of conversation in our workplace. Um, what can department leaders and or hospital systems do to tackle burnout?
I think interpersonal connections really, I think, is probably one of the areas where we need to really invest. And how do we support those interpersonal connections within our communities? Um, there's the areas that I think, as a system, as a leader, we focus on the workload of people, how what that looks like, and how do we support it so that the workload can be balanced. It's one area that I think will have a fair amount of impact. The other area that I kind of hear a lot about also is compensation. So how do we actually make sure that compensation also sort of fits within that realm? But I think and those are all things that institutions can handle. But I think when it comes down to um, you can make all the changes in the world to workload and to compensation, but if you're not happy with the people that you're working with, and that interpersonal connection really is very important. So what can we do to support that? And the last couple of years have made that more challenging. And as we enter this next phase of peri-pandemic world where our workload seems to be increasing across the whole country, um, you know, we really do need to be focusing on this. I wish I had more answers. I think everybody's trying to figure this out within
Mm-hmm.
our own institution and organization. Like there's a lot of efforts towards supporting wellness, and like just earlier this week we had like a um, physician outing, like just like everybody come to a restaurant and have dinner, and like this isn't just anesthesiologists, this is like physicians in the institution, like just come and mingle. And it's nice that people can access those, but then at the same time, it's okay for people to not access them, right? Like maybe you need some
Mm-hmm.
personal time, and just respecting and meeting people where they're at, right? Because adding more things to your plate doesn't necessarily solve it. So
Right. It's like creating more work.
right.
No, but you're right. I mean, I think um, those personal connections that we've lost a lot of has really um, impacted physician burnout.
Mhm.
So, and recreating those and creating those, that's it's difficult. And what have you done personally to help prevent burnout in your life?
Um, I mean, for me, talking about community, just my family is really at the center for everything that I do. Like all of the decisions, everything that I do, really put like it's with with them at the center. And one um, concept that I remember reading about years ago is this concept of a four-way win. And if you
Mm-hmm.
think of like our life, and this is a concept by Stu Friedman. He's faculty at Wharton in Penn. The idea that life has four domains, right? Like our work, whatever that work is, our community, our family, and then ourselves, like as a single human being, ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And then, there's, uh, if you try to figure out how much time you're spending in each of those, there's only so much time in the day. And at some point, you're like, well, if I spend more time here, I'm spending less time there, right? And there's this constant conflict between all of those, right? And the four-way win concept kind of uh, allows for more intermingling between those things. It's like, um, things are not necessarily as clearly bucketed, so um, so that's something that like I do whenever I try to think of like a new activity or something that I'm trying to do, is how many buckets does this actually touch, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Um, so for example, I've volunteered my time in several ways, like being a camp doctor for a summer camp for kids with special needs, or at one point teaching Sunday school for our church. And it's like, why am I spending more time? Like, I already have enough things going on, and how am I going to be able to fit this one more thing, you know? But then, with these, like, my kids don't ever get to see me at work because they don't get to see me. But like, if I'm a doctor in the camp that is somewhere close to where they're at, then they know that their parent is the doctor at the camp. They can kind of see me in some capacity. I'm giving something back to the community. I'm there's a little bit of overlap there. So like it touches a few things. And then also, if I talk to people at work, if I talk to a parent of a child, like, hey, yeah, like when I was at summer camp doing this silly thing with some kids as a doctor, like that actually kind of does really lend itself to making my job easier, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
So like, here's one example of one activity that does kind of fit four buckets. And when you're thinking of it from that standpoint, it's like, wow, this actually is maybe something that's really worthwhile, right? So
Mm-hmm.
and not everything that you do in life will fit into those four buckets, but it's a good exercise to at least help me to process that information.
Mm-hmm.
My wife is such an important role in our journey together, like over the last, I mean, we've been together for almost 20 years now. And we've had our fair share of challenges. um Not comparing cards, but like, we've had our share. And I think our philosophy has kind of just evolved to like, we can handle it together,
Mm-hmm.
like
Mm-hmm.
just again, there's strength in numbers and community. um and so we try to really be there to help each other out as much as we can,
Mm-hmm.
you
Mm-hmm.
know
Yeah, yeah. It's so important to have I'll say a good family partner, a good partner. So important. You won't get through as much as you want without one. So, and actually,
Yeah,
this has come up a few times in this
really.
conversation.
But it's
Yes.
not, I have to say, having met many people, I mean, it's that, like, that life partner can look lots of different ways to lots of different people,
Mhm. Yeah.
and what works for us, and the next person will
Hmm.
be something else, you know.
Yes.
But some support system, something like, all of this is bigger than one person.
Mm-hmm.
So don't
Mm-hmm.
think that one person does get to do it all, you know?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And thanks for sharing that four wheel thing. I've never heard of that. It's very interesting. It kind of makes it easier, I guess, or it's a good tool to help you decide if this is a new thing that you should really take on or can really take on. So I kind of like it.
Mhm.
I'm gonna use it.
Yeah. No, it's I think it's from a book. He talks about it. It's called Total Leadership. So that was one of the fun concepts in there.
Hmm. Cool. On a more personal note, as an accomplished leader in healthcare, what advice would you give to your younger self?
I don't think I ever dreamed big enough for what was possible, you know,
Hmm.
um, and to just believe in yourself, you know. I mean, the idea that I would be a division chief and vice chair and a leader in an institution, like it's something that I had um, I've learned a lot of grown in this role, but it's not something that I would have envisioned, like I said. And also as a having lived my life as a parent and also, being able to sit here as Julia with all of the path that I've taken, like this was an impossibility. And the fact that it's possible makes me wonder what else is possible that I didn't think was,
Hmm. Hmm.
you know?
Hmm. 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 Well, thank you so much for sharing your story. It's been wonderful talking to you, and thank you for being you.
Mm. Thank you for hosting me and for your time as well.